They laughed at Earth's muscles, then watched a human hoist their captain. Part 2. Gravity Well. The ship's fitness suite had been designed by someone who had never met a human. Nate Calloway stood in the middle of it on his second morning aboard the Pale Horse, and looked at the resistance machine the way a grown man looks at a children's bicycle. The maximum setting was 15 kilograms. He pulled it once, the cable snapped. So he started working out in the cargo bay instead. He used the crate straps as resistance bands. He looped them around the overhead conduit rails and pulled against them until the straps creaked. He did pull-ups from the gantry frame, which was bolted to the ship's structural spine and rated to hold a 2-ton drone. It held him fine, though it made a sound it had never made before. Metal complaining about something it had not expected to carry. On the third day, a maintenance notice appeared on the ship's internal board. It read, "Crew are reminded that overhead conduit infrastructure is not recreational equipment. Unauthorized physical contact with structural components may result in maintenance charges." Nate read the notice. He did another set of pull-ups. On the fourth day, the notice was updated. "This means you, Calloway." He appreciated that they had learned his name. The mess hall was worse. The Pale Horse served food for 11 species, which meant the mess hall looked like a chemistry lab that had given up on organization. The Cathari ate nutrient paste from tubes. The Dravani soaked in mineral baths and absorbed what they needed through their skin. The Tessic gnawed on dense protein blocks that looked like gray bricks and sounded when chewed like someone stepping on gravel. Nate ate a peanut butter sandwich. He sat at a corner table on his first evening and assembled it from supplies he had packed himself. Bread, peanut butter, a plastic knife. He spread the peanut butter the way his mother had taught him, all the way to the edges, and he took a bite. 3 crew members at the next table stopped what they were doing. A Cathari navigator named Dren Vosk stared at him from across the room with all 5 eyes. A Dravani systems tech made a sound that Nate would later learn was the Dravani equivalent of gagging. And a small round alien from a species Nate had not yet identified simply got up and left. He chewed, he swallowed, he took another bite. He learned over the next 2 days that chewing was the problem. 2 of the species aboard considered it violent. The mechanical destruction of food using bone structures inside the skull. They had a word for it. The closest translation was skull crushing. They used it the way humans use the word gruesome. Nate started eating alone. He did not mind. He had grown up on a farm outside Lexington, where the nearest neighbor was 4 miles of fence line away. Solitude was not a punishment. It was a climate he knew how to live in. But he noticed things. He noticed the way crew members stepped aside when he walked down a corridor, pressing against the walls as if he were a vehicle passing through. He noticed the way conversations paused when he entered a room and resumed when he left. He noticed the way the Cathari watched him when they thought he was not looking, their compound eyes tracking his arms, his shoulders, the way his weight shifted when he moved. He was being studied. With the careful, clinical attention of creatures who had found something in their habitat that did not belong there. A Cathari engineer named Pilek made it official. On the 6th day, Nate arrived at his workstation to find a data tablet propped against his console. On it was a xenobiology study titled Musculoskeletal Density in High-Gravity Bipeds, a comparative analysis of Homo sapiens and equivalent Deathworld species. The next day, there was another one. Endurance thresholds in persistence predator species, why they do not stop. The day after that, bone density and impact resistance in Terran mammals, implications for structural interaction. Pilek was not being friendly. Pilek was collecting data. To him, Nate was not a crew member. He was a research subject who happened to be able to carry his own crates. Nate read every tablet. He left notes in the margins. corrections mostly. The study on bone density had underestimated human skull thickness by 12%. The endurance paper had failed to account for what humans called a second wind, which was the thing that happened when a human body should stop, but the human mind simply refused. Pillek found the notes. His antenna went rigid. He came to Nate's workstation the next afternoon. "You read them?" Pillek said. "Yes, sir," Nate said. "You corrected them. Some of the numbers were off." Pillek stood very still for a moment. Then he said, "Your species should not be able to read academic Cathari notation. It is not taught outside our universities." Nate shrugged. "I looked it up." Pillek's antenna did something complicated. He left without another word. On the 9th day, Nate helped a Cathari crew member named Lisset reach an access panel on the upper engineering deck. The panel was 3 meters off the deck, recessed behind a coolant line. Lisset needed to reach it to replace a sensor module. The stepladder designed for her species only went to 2 meters. Nate looked at the panel. He looked at Lisset. She weighed, by his estimate, about as much as a border collie. "May I?" he said, and held out his hands. Lisset looked at his hands. She looked at the panel. She looked at his hands again. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Lift you," he said. He lifted her, both hands around her torso, raised overhead, held steady. Her feet left the deck. She rose past the coolant line, past the junction box, to the access panel. She hung there, 3 meters up, held in place by a human being who was not straining, who was not shaking, who was breathing the same way he had been breathing before he picked her up. She replaced the sensor module. It took 40 seconds. Nate held her the entire time with the casual stillness of a man holding a ceiling fan in place at a hardware store. He set her down, gently, the way someone sets down a glass they are worried about breaking. Lassie stared at him. Her antennae were flat. Her lower mandibles were slightly open. She stared at him the way someone stares at a piece of heavy machinery that has just said, "Excuse me," and opened a door for them. "Thank you," she said, in a voice that suggested she was rethinking several things about the universe. "Any time," Nate said, and went back to his crates. That night, in his bunk, he opened his personal comm unit and found a message from Cora. His sister was 19. She was studying veterinary science at a school in Louisville, and she sent him messages every few days, full of pictures of dogs she had met, and questions about space that made him smile. Are the aliens nice? Do they like you? He thought about this for a while. He thought about the way Lisette had stared at him. He thought about Pillek's data tablets. He thought about the maintenance notice on the board. He thought about the Dravani tech who gagged when he ate a sandwich. He typed, "They are real polite. Kind of like church people who smile at you but will not sit in your pew." He sent it. He lay back on his bunk, which was too short for him by about 10 inches, and he put his feet up on the wall because there was nowhere else for them to go, and he closed his eyes. He did not sleep for a while. On the 12th night, Captain Yil So came to the cargo bay. It was late shift. Nate was organizing crates alone. The drones sat idle in their charging ports. He preferred to do it by hand. It was honest work, and it made his body feel useful in a way that sitting in a chair never did. Her bioluminescence was cycling through colors Nate could not name. He had been reading about Dravani emotional expression in his off hours, but their color language had over 300 documented shades, and he could identify maybe 12. "Calloway," she said. He set down a crate. "Captain." She walked closer. She was tall, taller than him by almost a foot, but she weighed less than a quarter of what he weighed, and the difference was visible in the way they stood. She moved like smoke. He stood like concrete. "Does it hurt?" she asked. He looked at her. "Gravity," she said. "Your planet. Earth has, what is the figure? 9.8 meters per second, every second, pulling everything down. Your whole lives." She paused. Her bioluminescence shifted. Does living under that much weight hurt? He thought about mornings on the farm, when his back ached and his knees popped, and the hay was wet and heavy, and the sun was not up yet, and everything about the world was pulling at him, like it wanted him to lie down and stay there. "You get used to it," he said. Captain Yil-So tilted her head. In the low light, her translucent skin caught the cargo bay's running lights, and for a moment she looked like something made of glass and starlight. "That," she said, "is what concerns me." She turned and left. Nate stood alone in the cargo bay. He picked up the next crate. He carried it where it needed to go. He did not think about what she meant. He did not need to. He had been carrying weight his whole life. He had never once thought about putting it down. They laughed at Earth's muscles, then watched a human hoist their captain. Part 3, Contact. The alarm started at 0347 ship time, and Drenvosk knew what they meant before the tactical display confirmed it. 3 contacts, staggered formation, moving fast and closing faster. He had seen the formation before, in combat footage shown during Concord training modules. 3 cutters, each carrying 10 to 15 raiders, spreading wide to hit multiple breach points at once. The staggered approach meant they were not planning to shoot the pale horse apart. They wanted it intact. They wanted the cargo, which meant they were coming inside. Captain Yil-So arrived on the command deck 40 seconds after the alarm. Her bioluminescence was white, solid, unbroken white, the Dravani color for absolute focus. She did not run. She walked to her command chair and sat down and began giving orders in a voice that sounded like it had been stored in a freezer and taken out exactly when needed. Tessic security to boarding positions. Seal all non-essential compartments. Engineering, bring shields to full. Navigation, plot an emergency jump and hold it in buffer. She paused. All non-combat crew to shelter quarters. That includes the human contingent. Dren keyed in the jump coordinates. His 4 hands moved across the console with the trained speed of someone who had practiced this drill 40 times and hoped it would never be real. The coordinates locked. He held them. Around him the command deck moved with the grim efficiency of people who had imagined this day and hated that it had arrived. On the lower decks, the Tessic security team geared up. 12 of them. Big, reptilian, cold-blooded in the literal and professional sense. They carried kinetic slug throwers and short-range shock blades, and they moved to their positions with a silence that Dren had always found more frightening than any alarm. The humans were directed to shelter quarters on Deck 4. 4 of them went. Nate Calloway did not. Dren did not know this yet. He was busy watching the tactical display, watching the 3 Vren cutters close the distance like teeth closing around a throat. They were fast. The Vren were always fast. Their species had evolved as pack hunters on a high-oxygen world with low gravity and thick forests, and they moved through space the way they moved through trees, in bursts, in angles, never straight. The first cutter hit the portside cargo bay airlock at 0351. The breach was loud. Not the sound of an explosion, but the sound of metal being cut, which was somehow worse. A high, thin scream of alloy surrendering, and then the rush of pressurized air equalizing. Vren boots. Many of them. 12 raiders poured through the breach. They were bipedal, lean, wiry in the way that wire is wiry, all tension and no softness. Their forearms ended in serrated bone ridges that could open a Cathari hull plate like a can lid. Their eyes were black from edge to edge, and they reflected the cargo bay's emergency lighting in a way that made them look like holes punched in the shape of faces. They spread across the cargo bay in seconds. The Tessic met them. It went badly. The Tessic were strong and disciplined and trained. The Vren were faster. They moved in pairs, flanking, cutting, using the cargo stacks as cover. 3 Tessic went down in the first 30 seconds. 1 took a bone ridge across the arm. 1 was hit from behind. The third simply could not track a target that moved that fast. Dren watched the cargo bay feed from the command deck. His hearts, all 3 of them, were running at combat rhythm. Then Nate Calloway walked into the cargo bay. Dren saw him on the security feed. The image was grainy, washed in red emergency light, but there was no mistaking the shape. Too wide for the hatchway, too heavy for the deck, moving with a pace that did not match the chaos around him. He was carrying a cargo hook, standard equipment, about a meter long, curved steel, used for securing crate straps. It was not a weapon. It was about to become one. The first Vren reached him at full sprint. It came from his left, bone ridges extended, moving at a speed that would have outpaced any Cathari or Dravani alive. It closed the gap in under a second. Calloway caught it by the forearm. He did not dodge. He did not step back. He reached out and caught a creature moving at full sprint by the forearm, and the creature stopped. Its momentum did not disappear. Into Calloway's grip, up through his arm, into his shoulder, into his legs, and into the deck plating beneath his boots. He pivoted. He threw the Vren into a cargo stack. The impact sounded structural, the sound of load-bearing material being asked to bear a different kind of load. The Vren did not get up. On the command deck, Dren's mandibles parted. He did not blink. Cathari could not blink, but if he could have, he would have forgotten to. What happened next was not a fight. Not in any way the galaxy understood fighting. Galactic combat was about speed and positioning and technology. It was about being faster, or better armed, or more numerous. Nate Calloway was none of those things. He was slower than the Vren. He had no armor. He had a cargo hook and 2 hands. He also had roughly 95 kilograms of bone and muscle, built by a planet that pulled at everything on its surface with a force the Vren had never evolved to resist. He had tendons thicker than Vren wrist bones. He had a grip strength that could crush the cargo rail of a 200-kilogram crate. And he had the endurance of a species that had once chased its prey across open savanna for hours until the prey's heart burst. The Vren came at him in pairs. He broke them in pairs. One went down to the cargo hook across the ribs. Another was gripped by the neck and held off the deck, legs kicking until it stopped struggling. A third lunged for his back. He reached behind him with one hand, grabbed it by what passed for a collar on Vren combat gear, and threw it over his shoulder, into the deck, face first. The remaining Vren pulled back, regrouped. 8 of them left. They circled. They hissed, the high-frequency sound their species used to coordinate pack attacks. Calloway stood in the middle of them, breathing hard but not winded. The cargo hook hung from his right hand. His left hand was open, loose, the fingers slightly curled. He watched them the way a man watches a problem he has already solved but not yet finished. Then the second alarm hit. Command deck breach. Dren heard it before the alarm registered. The sound of cutting. The ceiling above the command deck. A second Vren team coming through the maintenance shaft from above. They dropped in, 5 of them, fast. 2 went for the Tessic guard at the door. 3 went for the command chair. 3 went for Captain Yil So. She stood. Her bioluminescence was still white. She did not run. Dravani did not run. Their bodies were not built for it. She was 25 kilograms of translucent skin and luminous veins, and a mind sharper than anything else on the ship, and she could not outrun a Vren, any more than glass can outrun a hammer. One of them hit her, forearm ridge across the shoulder. She went down. Another pinned her against the command console, bone ridges pressed to the thin skin of her throat. Dren reached for the nearest thing he could use as a weapon. A data tablet. He knew it was useless. Captain Yil So opened the ship-wide channel. Her voice was calm. It was always calm. She said 2 words. Cargo bay. That was all. She did not say help. She did not say please. She said the location, and she trusted that it would be enough. On the cargo bay feed, Dren saw Calloway stop. He had been mid-swing. A Vren was coming at him from the right. He stopped. He turned his head toward the nearest speaker. He heard the captain's voice. He heard the 2 words. Then he looked up. Not at the ceiling, at the structure above him. The cargo bay's interior support struts. Vertical steel beams that ran from the deck to the spine of the ship, 3 decks up. They were not ladders. They were not meant to be climbed. They were structural supports welded into the frame of the Pale Horse. Calloway dropped the cargo hook. He jumped, caught the nearest strut at the 2-meter mark, and began to climb. Hand over hand, 95 kilograms of human body ascending a vertical steel beam with no footholds, no harness, no assistance. His hands gripped the I-beam flanges and pulled. His boots found purchase on rivet heads and welt seams. He went up the way fire goes up. Not fast, relentless. 1 deck, 2 decks. His arms should have given out. They did not. His grip should have failed. It did not. He climbed the way his species had once climbed out of trees and down from mountains and up from every dark place the planet had tried to bury them in. 3 decks. He kicked through the maintenance hatch at the top of the strut. The hatch was secured with a standard locking bolt rated for tool-assisted removal. He kicked it open with his boot. He came through onto the command deck covered in sweat and coolant from a burst line in the shaft. 2 Vren on the captain, 1 standing, 1 holding her down. The standing one turned. Calloway hit it with his fist. No tool, no weapon. His closed fist against the side of a Vren's skull. The Vren hit the wall dented. The second one looked up from the captain. Its black eyes reflected Calloway's shape. It tightened its grip on Yil So's throat. Nate crossed the deck in 2 strides. He pulled the Vren off the captain with his left hand. With his right, he reached down and lifted Captain Yil So off the deck. He hoisted her, both hands now. 1 under her back, 1 under her legs. He lifted her the way someone lifts a child out of danger. The way someone lifts something precious and breakable and infinitely lighter than anything they are built to carry. 25 kilograms. She weighed 25 kilograms, and he held her as though she were made of breath. He set her behind him, between himself and the wall, safe. Then he turned back to the remaining Vren. Well, he said. His voice was steady. His breathing was rough. His hands were bleeding, where the steel struts had bitten into his palms. All right, then. On the navigation console, Dren Vosk sat frozen. His 4 hands were still on the controls. His antennae were rigid. His compound eyes had recorded everything in the high-resolution detail his species used for threat assessment, and his brain was trying to file what he had just witnessed into a category that made sense. It did not fit. His species had 14 words for fear. He was experiencing a 15th, and it did not have a name yet. It sat between terror and reverence, in a place his language had never needed to go, because his species had never before encountered something that was this dangerous and this gentle in the same body at the same time. He watched Nate Calloway stand between the captain and whatever was left of the boarding party, bleeding and breathing and unmovable, and he thought, oh. They laughed at Earth's muscles, then watched a human hoist their captain. Part 4. Wait. The medbay smelled like iodine and something sharper, something chemical that Nate could not name. Alien medicine. It stung the inside of his nose and made his eyes water, which was inconvenient because the ship's medic was already nervous enough without her patient crying. Solin was Cathari, small, precise, 4 hands moving with the mechanical accuracy of someone who had spent her entire career treating species made of hollow bones and fluid membranes. She had never treated a human before. She was handling it the way a watchmaker handles a brick. "Hold still," she said, for the 6th time. "I am holding still," Nate said. "Your chest is moving. That is called breathing." Solin paused. All 4 of her hands went still. Her antennae flattened, which Nate had learned was the Cathari version of someone counting to 10. "I need to clean the lacerations on your torso," she said. "I need you to remove your shirt." He pulled the shirt off. It was ruined anyway. Vren bone ridges had opened 4 cuts across his ribs and left arm, and the fabric was stiff with dried blood. Human blood. Red. The color made Solin's antennae go even flatter. She looked at his chest, at his arms, at the layered architecture of muscle that a high-gravity world had spent 28 years building onto his frame. She looked at it the way an engineer looks at something that should not exist according to the math she was taught. She kept pausing, reaching for a cut, stopping, reaching again. "I can put my shirt back on if this is weird," Nate said. "It is extremely weird," Solin said. She did not stop working. Vren forearm ridges were designed to cut through Cathari chitin and Dravani membrane, not through the layered density of human skin and the muscle beneath it. What would have opened a Cathari from shoulder to hip had barely broken Nate's surface. Solin sealed each cut with a bonding compound, applied a cooling patch to his bruised rib, and stepped back. "You should rest," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Nate said, in a tone that communicated clearly he was not going to rest. He pulled on a fresh shirt and walked out of the medbay into a ship that was looking at him differently. The change was not uniform. It fractured along species lines, the way light fractures through a prism and comes out as different colors depending on the angle. The Tessic security team treated him with quiet respect. Not warmth. Tessic did not do warmth. They did acknowledgement. When Nate passed them in the corridor, they nodded. A short, sharp dip of the head that carried more meaning than any speech. One of them, a grizzled officer named Rek, who had served on border patrol ships for 20 years, stopped Nate outside the armory. He gripped Nate's forearm. Both hands, scaled fingers pressing into human skin. Nate looked at him. "Tessic gesture," Rek said. "It means, your violence is mine if you need it." Nate considered this. "Thank you," he said. Rek released his arm and walked away. Nate stood in the corridor for a moment, rubbing the spot where the Tessic's grip had been. It was the first time since boarding the Pale Horse that a crew member had touched him on purpose. The Cathari reacted with scientific urgency. Pillock appeared at Nate's workstation within an hour of the boarding's end, carrying 2 data tablets and a recording device. His antennae were vibrating at a frequency Nate associated with extreme excitement. "I need to document your performance metrics," Pillock said. "Grip force, reaction time, vertical ascent speed, sustained combat output." "Good morning to you too," Nate said. "It is not morning, it is 1400 hours. Your species' relationship with temporal greetings is irrational." "Sure is." Pillock had upgraded Nate in his research notes. Nate caught a glimpse of the file header on Pillock's tablet. It had been changed from human male specimen, cargo handler, to strategic asset, Death World origin, high priority. Nate did not know if this was an improvement. The Dravani were harder to read. Their emotions lived in their bioluminescence, and most of the Dravani crew had dimmed theirs since the attack. Muted colors. Several of them had filed formal requests with Captain Yil So to have the human crew members relocated to a separate section of the ship. Not because of anything Nate had done wrong, because of what he had proven he could do. He understood this. He did not like it, but he understood it. A species that weighs 25 kilograms watches someone throw a creature across a room with one arm, and the first thought is not, I am safe. The first thought is, what happens when he is not on my side? Nate ate his peanut butter sandwich alone in the corner of the mess hall that night. Nobody sat near him. Nobody had sat near him before, either. Before, the empty seats around him had said, you are strange. Now they said, you are dangerous. He could not decide which was worse. On the 14th day after the attack, Captain Yil So summoned him to her quarters. Her quarters were dim, warm, and humid, the air thick with a mineral mist that Dravani needed to keep their skin from drying. Nate stepped inside, and his lungs adjusted to the heavy air. Yil So's quarters were designed for a creature from a low-gravity moon. Everything in the room was delicate. Thin furniture, glass surfaces, fabric that looked like it would tear if he breathed on it. He stood just inside the door because he was afraid to sit on anything. Yil So was seated in a chair that looked like it was made of frozen smoke. Her bioluminescence was cycling through colors. Slow, deliberate, like someone choosing their words by turning them over in their hands before speaking. Sit, she said. He found the sturdiest-looking surface in the room, a low bench near the wall, and lowered himself onto it with the care of a man sitting on a soap bubble. My species does not have a concept for what you did, she said. Nate waited. We have words for rescue, she continued. We have words for combat. We have a word for sacrifice, and a word for bravery, and a word for tactical intervention under hostile conditions. She paused. Her bioluminescence settled into a deep, slow pulse. We do not have a word for someone who carries you out of danger as though you weigh nothing. Because in our experience, everyone weighs something. She was tall and thin and luminous, and the cuts on her shoulder from the Vren's bone ridge had been sealed with the same bonding compounds Soline had used on him, and he could see them through her translucent skin, like cracks in stained glass. He wanted to say something easy, something that would fill the silence without filling it with too much. He almost said, well, all right then, which was what he said when he did not know what to say, which was most of the time. He did not say it. You do not weigh nothing, Captain, he said. You weigh exactly enough. Yil So looked at him. Her bioluminescence shifted. The cycling stopped. The colors resolved into a single shade. Deep, warm, steady. A color Nate had never seen on her before, and could not have named if someone had paid him. She held it for a long time. Thank you, Calloway, she said. He left her quarters and walked down the corridor to his bunk, and his boots made the sound they always made on the deck plating, the heavy, even sound of something that was built to carry more than itself. In his bunk, he opened his comm unit. Cora had sent 3 messages. The first was a picture of a golden retriever she had met at the clinic. The second was a question about whether aliens had dogs. The third said, Are you okay? You have not written in 5 days. Mom is worried. I told her you are fine, but you better actually be fine. Nate looked at the screen. He thought about writing what had happened. He thought about describing the alarms, and the breach, and the Vren, and the climb. He thought about telling Cora that he had picked up the captain of a starship the way he used to pick up barn cats, and that the look on the crew's faces had been the same look those cats always gave him, confused and offended and unwilling to admit they felt safe. He got 3 sentences in. He deleted them. He typed, Had a rough day at work. Everybody is fine. Miss you. He sent it. He turned off the screen. He lay back on the bunk that was too short and put his feet on the wall because there was nowhere else for them to go. The ship hummed around him. The engines, the life support, the 40 souls breathing and working and sleeping in the thin shell of metal that kept them alive between the stars. He closed his eyes. He understood something, lying there, that he could not have put into words. The thing that had saved the captain was the same thing that made the crew step aside in corridors. The strength that had pulled the Vren away was the same strength that made Soline's hands shake when she touched his skin. He was useful and terrifying, and they were the same quality, and the galaxy had no word for the place where those two things met. Back home, people shook his hand, clapped him on the shoulder. His mother hugged him, and Cora punched his arm when she was happy, and the dogs leaned against his legs, and his father, before he died, had gripped the back of his neck and squeezed, and all of it was contact, and all of it was easy, and none of it required anyone to overcome the fear that he might break them. Here, the only person who had touched him on purpose was a Tessic soldier pledging violence. He did not feel sorry for himself. He was not built for that, either. But the ship felt a little bigger than it had before, and his bunk felt a little smaller, and the wall where his feet rested was cold, and he kept his eyes closed until sleep came, because there was nothing in the room worth looking at. They laughed at Earth's muscles, then watched a human hoist their captain. Part 5. Equilibrium. The pale horse limped into Concord Station on 1.5 engines, and a stubbornness that Dren Vosk was beginning to suspect it had caught from its human crew. He guided it in from the navigation blister, hands steady on the controls, plotting a docking approach that accounted for the dead port thruster and the hull scarring that had changed the ship's drag profile. The station's docking authority hailed them 3 times. The first was standard clearance. The second was a request for damage assessment. The third was a question Dren had never been asked before in 11 years of hauling cargo through deep space. Pale Horse, confirm, do you have human crew aboard? Dren looked at the comm panel. He looked at Captain Yeel So, who was standing at the command rail, her bioluminescence a calm, steady blue for the first time in weeks. Confirmed, she said. 5 humans, all alive. The docking authority went quiet for 4 seconds. Then, understood. Proceed to Bay 12. You have priority clearance. They had never had priority clearance before. Concord Station was enormous. A spinning ring of metal and glass and commerce, home to 200,000 permanent residents, and a rotating population of traders, diplomats, refugees, and the occasional pirate pretending to be one of the other 3. It was the closest thing the galaxy had to a capital city, and it hummed with the accumulated noise of 31 species trying to exist in the same place without killing each other. The Pale Horse docked. The crew disembarked, and Dren noticed, before he was even through the airlock, that something had changed. People were watching the humans, not the usual way. Dren had spent years observing how other species looked at humans. The mild curiosity, the fake disgust, the automatic classification, death worlder, high maintenance, primitive, interesting footnote to the galactic census. This was different. The species on the concourse watched the 5 human crew members walk through the arrivals gate with attention. Focus. The particular focus that prey animals reserve for something they have just learned can catch them. Word had traveled ahead. Of course it had. The Pale Horse's emergency broadcast during the attack had been logged by 3 relay stations. The incident report had been filed while they were still in transit. Somewhere between the Tessic Corridor and Concord Station, the story of a human cargo handler defeating a Vren boarding party and climbing 3 decks to rescue a starship captain had stopped being an incident report and started being a rumor. And rumor, in the galaxy, moved faster than light. The Concord's Military Advisory Council requested a formal briefing within 6 hours of docking. Dren was called as a witness. He put on his dress uniform, which he had not worn in 3 years, and which still fit because Cathari did not gain weight. He reported to the council chamber on the station's upper ring, a curved amphitheater designed to hold representatives from every member species. It was not full today. Only the military minds. admirals, strategists, intelligence officers. 23 of them, 9 species, all watching. Captain Yil So stood at the center of the chamber and delivered her report. She spoke for 11 minutes. Her voice was clear and measured, and her bioluminescence was white, because she was treating this with the same focused calm she brought to everything. She described the interception, the breach, the failure of the Tessic security response. She described in precise technical language the actions of cargo handler Nate Calloway. She described the cargo bay engagement. She described the climb. She described the moment a human male crossed a command deck, removed a Vren raider from her body with one hand, and lifted her to safety with the other. He carried me, she said, as though I weighed nothing, as though carrying a living being to safety was something his body had been waiting its entire life to do. The chamber was silent. Dren counted. 11 seconds. A Tessic admiral at the far end of the curved table leaned forward. He was old, scarred. His scales had the dull sheen of someone who had spent decades making decisions about violence. "How many humans does Earth have?" he asked. Captain Yil So did not hesitate. Approximately 8 billion. The silence that followed was a different kind. It was not confusion. It was not awe. It was the sound of strategic recalculation happening in real time. Every military mind in the room running the same equation. 8 billion organisms, built by a planet with 10 meters per second of constant gravitational pull, forged by predators, hardened by climate extremes, capable of sustained physical output that no other Concord species could match. 8 billion. The Tessic admiral leaned back. He looked at the Dravani intelligence chief beside him. The intelligence chief's bioluminescence flickered in a pattern Dren had never seen at a military briefing. "We need to reclassify them," the admiral said. It was not a question. Meanwhile, 3 levels below the council chamber, Nate Calloway was trying to find coffee. Concord Station had 412 food vendors. None of them served coffee, because coffee was an earth beverage made from the roasted seeds of a plant that evolved to produce caffeine as an insecticide, and the rest of the galaxy had read that description and decided they were fine without it. Nate stood in front of a beverage kiosk operated by a small blue 6-legged creature and read the menu, which was in 4 languages, none of them English. He pointed at something that looked like it might be warm and dark and bitter. He received a cup of something that was warm and dark and tasted like someone had dissolved a battery in hot water. He drank it anyway. He had grown up on gas station coffee. His standards were flexible. He walked the concourse. He was aware that people were staring. He had been stared at since he came aboard the Pale Horse, and before that, he had been stared at in every room he had ever entered that was not full of other people from Kentucky. He was used to being the biggest thing in the room. He just was not used to it meaning something. A group of Cathari children appeared. A school trip by the look of it. 12 of them, small, their exoskeletons still soft and pale with youth, chaperoned by 2 adults who were doing a poor job of keeping them together. The children scattered across the concourse like marbles on a tile floor, and one of them, either the bravest or the most reckless, split from the group and walked directly toward Nate. The child stopped in front of him. It came up to his knee. Its antennae pointed straight up, the Cathari equivalent of wide eyes. It reached out and touched his arm. One small 4-fingered hand pressed against the fabric of his sleeve, then against the muscle beneath it. Nate looked down. "You are very dense," the child said. Nate laughed. The first real laugh since the attack. The first real laugh in weeks, maybe. It came from the same place good laughs always come from. The place that is not trying to be anything other than honest. "Yeah," he said, "I get that a lot." The chaperones collected the child. One of them looked at Nate with an expression that mixed apology and fear in equal measure. Nate waved. It was fine. Everything was fine. He found a bench on the concourse, and sat down, and drank his terrible battery coffee, and watched the galaxy go past. 100 species moving through a single corridor, each one built by a different world, each one carrying the gravity of a different sky. He thought about Korra. He thought about the smell of cut grass, and the weight of hay bales, and the sound of cicadas in July. And he missed all of it, in the way you miss the thing that made you what you are. Back on the Pale Horse, repairs were underway. Dren found Nate in the cargo bay that evening, because of course, that was where he was, reorganizing crates, by hand. The drones sat idle in their charging ports, fully functional, entirely ignored. Dren stood in the doorway. He watched for a moment. He thought about the 14 words his species had for fear, and the 15th one that Nate had taught him. He thought about a new word he was building, one that did not exist yet in the Cathari language. It sat somewhere between danger and shelter. It meant a thing that could destroy you, but has chosen not to, and in that choice has become the safest thing you have ever known. He did not have a good word for it yet. He suspected he would spend the rest of his life looking for one. "Calloway," he said. Nate looked up from the crate he was carrying, sweat on his forehead, hands steady. The same patient, unhurried expression he wore for everything. "Vosk," he said. It was the first time they had used each other's names. The words sat in the air between them like a handshake, or a door opening, or the first note of something that might, given time and care, become a song. Dren stepped into the cargo bay. "Do you need help?" he asked. Nate looked at him, then at the crate, then at Dren's 4 thin arms, which could collectively lift about as much as one of Nate's hands. "Sure," Nate said. "Grab that end." The crate weighed almost nothing on his side, because Nate was carrying all of it, and they both knew this, and neither of them said it. They worked in the cargo bay for an hour, side by side, in a silence that did not need to be filled. In her quarters, Captain Yil So opened her final incident report. She scrolled to the section marked Recommended Species Classification for Homo sapiens. The existing entry read, Category 12, Limited Utility, High Maintenance. She deleted it. She sat for a moment, her bioluminescence cycling through colors that had no audience, shades of memory and recalculation, and the particular warmth of someone who has been carried to safety by hands that could have crushed her, and did not. She typed, Reclassify to Category 2. Recommend immediate integration into all Concord defense and emergency response operations. Previous assessments were based on incomplete data and the assumption that physical capability indicates cognitive limitation. This assumption is incorrect. They are not what we thought. They are what we need. Respectfully, do not make me explain this twice. She filed the report. On the other side of the station, the Tessic Admiral read it. He forwarded it to every member of the military council with a single annotation, agreed. And in the cargo bay of a battered ship called the Pale Horse, a Cathari navigator and a human cargo handler moved crates in the quiet space between 2 gravities, building something that did not have a name yet, but felt to both of them like it might be the beginning of enough. Dren opened his personal log that night. He typed slowly, as he always did, because the things worth saying took time. I have served with 43 species across 11 years of deep space navigation. I have cataloged their strengths and their fears, and the specific shapes of their courage. I have never once questioned the Concord's classification system. He paused. His antennae were still. His quarters were dark. I am questioning it now, not because it was wrong about humans, though it was deeply, but because it assumed that a species forged by crushing gravity, built by predators, tempered by an atmosphere that is technically on fire, would arrive among the stars and be anything less than remarkable. He thought about Nate in the cargo bay. The steady hands, the quiet voice, the laugh that sounded like home. We looked at their world and called it punishment. They looked at it and called it home. I do not have a word for what that makes them. He stared at the screen. I suspect they do. I suspect the word is human, and I suspect it has always been enough. He closed the log. He lay in the dark and listened to the sound of the pale horse breathing around him, all its species and all its gravities held together by metal and math and the stubborn fact of being alive. Somewhere below, boots on deck plating, heavy, steady, carrying more than their own weight, always carrying more than their own weight. They laughed at Earth's muscles, then watched a human hoist their captain. Part 1. Dead Weight. Dren Vosk read the new crew manifest 3 times, because he was sure someone in personnel had made a mistake. 5 humans. 5. Assigned to a cargo hauler running the Tessic corridor, which was the polite way of saying the part of space where ships went in full and came out empty, or did not come out at all. He set the data tablet down on his navigation console and rubbed 2 of his 4 hands together. The manifest listed their roles: 2 mechanics, 1 communications officer, 1 systems analyst, and 1 cargo handler. A human cargo handler. Dren had seen humans before. Once at a trade summit on Orbital Platform 9, a group of them had walked through the docking bay and every Kethari in the corridor had gone still. Not from fear, exactly. From the same instinct that makes small creatures freeze when something large passes overhead. Humans moved with a weight that did not match their size, as if the air around them was thicker, as if the floor owed them something. He had found it unpleasant. He had also found it difficult to stop watching. The Pale Horse was a mid-class cargo hauler. 40 crew, 11 species. Captain Yil So ran it with the calm of someone who had seen everything the Tessic corridor could throw at a ship, and had decided, quietly, that none of it was worth raising her voice over. She was Dravani, tall, thin. Her skin was nearly see-through, and beneath it ran veins of bioluminescent fluid that changed color with her mood. Most of the crew had learned to read her like weather. Blue meant steady. Green meant amused. White meant get out of her way. She stood on the command mezzanine now, looking down at the cargo bay as the new arrivals filed through the port airlock. The first 4 humans were unremarkable by galactic standards. Soft-skinned mammals in gray jumpsuits, blinking under the station's artificial lighting, carrying their duffel bags with both hands like anyone else. Dren noted them without interest. Standard Deathworlders, high maintenance, loud breathers, sweat. Then the 5th one came through the airlock. The deck plating flexed. Dren saw it from the navigation blister above the cargo bay. The actual deck plating, rated for multi-species foot traffic and light cargo drones, flexed under the man's boots. Not much. A millimeter, maybe 2. But Dren's species had compound eyes tuned to structural vibration, and he saw it the way a musician hears a wrong note. The man was not the tallest human in the group, but he was the widest. His shoulders barely cleared the hatchway, and he turned slightly to fit through it, the way someone turns to fit through a door in a house that was built for smaller people. Every house this man had ever entered had been built for smaller people. His name, according to the manifest, was Nate Calloway. Cargo handler. 28 Earth years. Origin: Kentucky. North American continent: Earth. Dren did not know what Kentucky was. He made a note to look it up. He suspected it was a place that built things like Nate Calloway on purpose. Calloway walked into the cargo bay with the unhurried gait of someone who had never once needed to rush. He looked around, took in the stacked crate rows, the drone charging stations, the overhead gantry system, nodded once, like a man surveying a barn he had been asked to clean. Then he set his duffel bag down and reported for duty. The loading operation was already behind schedule. Orbital Station Ket 7, handled resupply for ships heading into the corridor, and the work moved on a tight clock. Gravity assist drones carried the supply crates from the station's storage bays to the ship's hold, each crate weighing roughly 200 kilograms by Earth measurement. The drones handled this without complaint. They were machines. Complaint was not in their programming. Drone 6, however, had other ideas. It stuttered halfway across the cargo bay, dipped, and set its crate down crooked on the deck. Then its left thruster died, with a sound like a small animal giving up, and it sank to the floor. The maintenance team descended on it. 3 Cathari engineers, arguing before they even reached it. The repair would take 20 minutes, maybe 30. The clock did not care about their estimates. Nate Calloway watched this for about 40 seconds. Then he walked over to the crate. Dren saw what was about to happen a full second before it did, and in that second he thought, No, that is not possible. The crate weighs 200 kilograms. No biological organism on this station can. Calloway gripped the crate by its cargo rails, one hand on each side. He shifted his weight, bent his knees, and lifted. The crate came off the deck, not with a jerk, not with a grunt or a scream or the sound of a body breaking. It rose the way things rise when they are being carried by something that was designed, over millions of years of evolution, on a planet that hated everything living on it, to carry exactly this kind of load. He walked it to the hold, 30 meters, steady pace, set it down in its designated slot, straightened up, dusted his hands on his thighs. The cargo bay was silent. 41 crew members from 9 species stood in that bay. Not one of them moved. The 3 Cathari engineers had stopped arguing. A Tessic security officer had lowered the weapon he had been cleaning. A Dravani comms technician had dropped a data tablet and not noticed. His expression was patient and slightly confused, the way a dog looks when people stare at it for fetching a stick. "Where's the next one?" he said. Nobody answered. From the command mezzanine, Captain Yil So watched. Dren was close enough to see her. Her bioluminescent veins had shifted to a color he had never seen on her before. Not blue, not green, not white. Something else. Something that did not have a name in the Dravani emotional index he had memorized during his first year aboard. She said nothing. She watched Calloway walk back to the next crate, grip it, lift it, carry it. She watched him do it 6 more times. Dren turned back to his console. His 4 hands were still. His antennae were pressed flat against his skull, which was what happened to Cathari when their nervous systems received information that did not fit inside existing categories. He opened his personal log. He typed slowly, because his upper hands were shaking. I have been told that humans are persistence predators, that their species evolved to chase prey across open ground until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. I assumed this was a quaint fact about their evolutionary past, a curiosity, the kind of thing academics mention at conferences to fill time between important topics. He paused, looked at the cargo bay feed on his secondary screen. Calloway was carrying the 8th crate. His breathing had not changed. I am beginning to suspect, Dren typed, that it is not a fact about their past. It is a warning about their present. He closed the log. He listened to the steady, heavy sound of human boots on deck plating, and he thought about gravity, and about what it does to a thing that refuses to be crushed by it. Below, Nate Calloway set down the last crate, rolled his shoulders, and asked the nearest crew member if anyone knew where to get coffee on this ship. Nobody knew how to answer him, not because they did not know where the coffee was, because they were still trying to understand what they had just seen.